booties for black girl nerds.
Welcome to Black Girl Nerds, a Night of the Seven Kingdoms podcast entitled Nights, y'all. I am here with Jamie. We are here to discuss all 6 episodes of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We weren't able to give you the episode by episode breakdown because times are hard, but we are at least going to give you a wrap up TV recap of the first season. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, guys. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, it's good to at least be able to unpack and talk about this show and this season because, first of all, I miss us doing these recaps, but also this show was just incredible. Yeah. So I'm glad that we're at least doing this one episode breakdown for the fans.
Yes. And maybe next year we could do episode by episode. But for now, we're just getting our feet wet with this new series, which I love. I mean, it really has.
I do.
It's blown up on its own. We're returning to the Game of Thrones universe. This time a little bit different, right? So instead of the hour-long, 8 to 10 episodes, it's a little bit more condensed. So 6 episodes, 30 minutes each, which I don't personally mind the pacing. How do you feel about it?
I love it. I mean, there have been some complaints on social media about it being too short. I get that. I kind of like the small doses of episodes. It's not too long. It doesn't drag too much. It doesn't leave room for those filler moments sometimes that TV shows tend to do. So it's just the right bite-sized dose of entertainment that, frankly, I think we need a little bit more in television. So I like it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So yeah, we're just going to reflect on the first season. So this show is set roughly 100 years before the events of Game of Thrones and set 100 years after the events of House of the Dragon. So, the main takeaways here are the dragons are gone, right? The Targaryens are still the ruling political class, but they rule now kind of through fear, right? And they have to really prove themselves. They don't have the backing of their dragons anymore. And it kind of goes from, big political intrigue, feuding families, winning the throne, to a more grounded series. It's really more on the small folks. We get to kind of see a different perspective of this universe. And I kind of like the tone shift. And I also say it's not as dark. It's not as dark. Even the score is upbeat and light. And so I really like the change of pace. How did you feel about it?
I love the change of pace. It leans into the comedy so much so that one of the things that I picked up on, which I did written recaps on Black Girl Nerds of the series, is there's bodily function issues in every episode from farting to pooping to peeing, burping. And I think that, obviously it's intentional, but it leans into that humor, that toilet bowl humor that we've known in many films and TV shows of the past. So They pull no punches with that. And, you're very much watching a comedy.
Yeah, and I liked how in the opening, in the first episode where we first encounter Ser Duncan, when he's like, "All right, I'm gonna go to the tourney," and it's like you hear the dun dun da da dun dun da da da, and it's like, okay, we're back in the universe, and then he's like taking the biggest crap. Yes. I'm next to a tree, and you see his butt, and I was like, oh, this is the tone we're going with. Okay, so I liked it.
Yeah, I like that. And I felt like it was sort of like the writers and the creators letting you know that this is not a Game of Thrones kind of show. Like, even though it's from the Game of Thrones universe, you're not going to get tonally a Game of Thrones type of narrative coming out of this universe. So I like that. And it was a fun little quirky kind of dig to GOT.
Yeah, I think even George was like, I don't know about that, but it's their show, so I mean, he's one of the creators of the show too, but it's just like he was like, yeah, I wasn't, the biggest fan, but to each their own. So thought that was cool. So I just wanted to point out, so like, what I really loved about some of the score is like almost like the whistle, like the Andy Griffith show, like the, Egg and Dunk, like going down the road together. So that's the score by Dan Romer. And he was hired because he was going to bring a more grounded, intimate, rustic soundscape versus, Ramon's sweeping or orchestral grandeur, in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. So I love the little whistle motif and the almost buddy adventure energy coming from the score itself. And then as far as the creative team behind it, it's based off the Tales of Dunk and Egg novellas by George R.R. Martin. The showrunner is Ira Parker. And this is the third live action adaptation of A Song in Ice and Fire. So, the goal of the show is to tell a smaller story about an individual or individuals that quietly change history. So, pause there if you have any thoughts, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, Ira Parker, from what I understand, is been very candid about his adaptation of this story from the books. The books, according to many fans, I have not read the books, but I know some of the excerpts of the books.
Yep.
I've been more of a, what is the word? I know the Wikipedia version.
You're a wiki lore person,
I'm a
yeah.
wiki lore person, so I do know what happens to the adventures of Dunk and Egg, but from what I know, that A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is very much true to the source material. There have been some creative changes made, and Ira Parker has even gone on record to say that he's made some mistakes with the
Mhm.
changes that were made. And I appreciate that because,
Right.
I'm going to throw this out there, and this may be
Ryan Condal. Ryan,
I was going to say,
we're
like,
mad about Nettles. We're not over it. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Go
yeah, yeah.
ahead.
Seriously, like, and I asked him that in my interview, like, about Nettles, and
there is a character in the book that's a Dragonseed character by the name of Nettles. Is there at least a path to her story that we will get to in House of the Dragon?
I mean, I'm not ready to comment on any characters that we haven't met on screen yet. So I would just say stay tuned.
he kind of implied that, that maybe we may see her, but then we ended up not. So it's like, just be honest, just be truthful. If you make a mistake or if things didn't work out the way you had envisioned it, just be like, okay, that's not what we had planned. We make mistakes. Hopefully we can regroup and recover. And I appreciate that about Ira Parker's direction as a showrunner. And I would hope that Ryan can kind of learn from what Ira Parker has done and do that with season 3 of House of the Dragon. But we shall see. We shall
We
see.
shall see. Yeah, yeah. I love you, Ryan, but I will never forgive you for this. The Nettles erasure. I'm still not over it. I'm still mad
I
about it.
hear that. I
But
hear that.
I will recover. So let's start with the main players of the series. So we meet Ser Duncan the Tall, otherwise known as Dunk. He is a poor hedge knight, based or who originally from Flea Bottom. So he was a street rat, an orphan, who ends up following Sir Arlen Pennytree, who was his master. He was a squire for him, and Dunk is played by Peter Claffey. And what I love about Peter is that he embodies the role of Dunk. Dunk is said to be almost 7 feet in the books. Peter's 6'5", so good enough. And he's a former rugby player, which I thought was really cool, kind of giving him like the broad shoulders and kind of like the rugged grittiness of Dunk. So I really enjoyed his portrayal of this like lovable, adorable himbo with like a great heart. And then we have Aegon Egg Targaryen. He is a prince in disguise. He is the fourth Targaryen son of Prince Maekar, and he is escaping royal expectations. It's almost like Aladdin and Jasmine, if we think about it, right? Because Dunk is a street rat, Egg's royalty traveling in disguise, trying to get away from court life and seeking a new identity, and so. I just from the beginning, I was already fully into this duo. How about you?
I love it. I mean, first of all, this casting was amazing. Peter Claffey and Dexter Soul Ansel are just kinetic with their energy. They have such great chemistry. It's palpable. I love seeing these two on screen. I don't know how long the casting process was or how, many people that they looked to before they got these two actors together, but they are so perfect as Dunk and Egg. And everybody who watches this show, including the book readers, agree that these two are just a perfect fit for these characters. So I love them, and I just love seeing their journey throughout this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dex is just amazing. He's immediately fan favorite, and I even said like he even has the perfect shaped head for baldness. Like he literally looks like a little egg. I love it.
Egg. Yeah, it does.
So, yeah, so I really enjoyed. So we're just for this beginning of the recap, we're just going to actually go through all of the characters in the show to kind of like set down the groundwork for the world building here. So next, we meet and we actually met Sir Arlen very early on in the episode as a dead body. But Sir Arlen of Pennytree, he is played by we'll get back to that. So sorry, sir, but he is Duncan's knight that he serves under. He is gruff. He is he gets down and dirty.
Danny Webb.
Danny Webb, thank you. He he's clearly blessed in many ways. He definitely carries a long sword, if you know what I'm saying. I was I was not expecting that on the show in the flashbacks. I was like, oh well. Sir Pennytree. Okay.
Now was that Danny or was that a stand-in? I was just
That was
wondering.
a prosthetic, actually.
That was a prosthetic? Okay.
Fun fact, that was a prosthetic. They wanted to basically say he was blessed, even though he was a hedge.
They pulled a Mark Wahlberg on us. Okay.
They did. But they wanted to demonstrate that he was blessed in his own way, even though he was a hedge knight. He was carrying that long sword. Fun fact about the prosthetic: it was actually useful in the sense that they even the actor Danny was even able to go to the bathroom using his prosthetic. So because he was outside all day in the cold, and they're like, "All right, man, we don't want to have to take
Danny's
off the
probably
prosthetic."
like, "Can I keep this?"
Right. Can I keep this for future endeavors? Yes. So we encounter Sir Arlen. Dunk described him as a good man, as a great knight. And he was not anyone to play with. Like we saw him smacking the crap out of Duncan, but Dunk always said he only hit me when I deserved it. So he is referenced very often in the show. We see him in flashbacks, but like his legacy essentially lives on in the show, even though he was a small character, a hedge knight, a simple man. He very much like sets Duncan on his path. Next we meet Raymond Fossaway. He is the squire of Sir Stephen Fossaway. And he quickly becomes friends with Dunk. They immediately bond. They seem to be outsiders. And he ultimately ends up putting his life on the line for Dunk. Like you just met this guy and you're already like showing loyalty. And a lot of fans were saying that he was giving like, I don't know what's the word. He was given pod energy, like having some type of prowess in the bedroom, because he ends up marrying Red, the prostitute, by the end of the series. And he's like,
yeah, I have thoughts about that.
Do you want to give those thoughts now?
Yeah, so Red also she's referred to as Rowan, which is kind of interesting because the actress's name is Rowan Robinson.
Yep.
So that's really interesting. But we actually meet Red slash Rowan in the very first episode. And Red is introduced to Dunk by Raymond for the first time as if they never met, even though Dunk already knows who she is. So Red is sort of trying to play off like she doesn't know who Dunk is. And I'm like, sis, so you're not going to reveal to your man that you already met Dunk before. So that to me is already suspicious. And then she gets married to Raymond, and this is because she's now with child. So, and she's a woman of the night, she's been around the block. So I don't even know if that kid is his.
Oh, it's definitely not his.
Yeah.
Like,
so
she's already showing, it's like she just got married to Raymond. So It's like, Raymond, baby, that's not your baby.
So what is her intentions of, and granted, I don't know all of the details of these stories. I only know the wiki versions. So what is her intentions of wanting to be with Raymond? I don't feel that they're pure intentions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, for sure. She definitely is taking advantage. And just shout out to Sean Thomas who plays Raymond. But yeah, it's very clear that that's not his child, and she's obviously a social climber. She was
that part
previously with another lord, and now she find this newly knighted, squire who's now he's a knight, and she's like, oh, I'll come up. Here's an opportunity, and
right.
Now she's a lady. So yes, and then we also meet Tansel. She is a Dornish puppeteer. And quickly Dunk is falling for old girl. He immediately has a thing for her. Even at one point, Egg is like making fun of him, and he's like, shut up. So that's the lady of his dreams. And it's funny, I don't know if you noticed this, I think a lot of people pointed out that she kind of resembles his childhood friend Rafe.
Yes.
So they're like, he has a type. So and Tansel is played by Tamsin Crawford. And I think you had told me we had posted an article about some of the characters in Game of Thrones that may appear in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and she liked the post. So shout out to you, Tamsin.
Yes.
Yeah. And then next we have Prince Baelor Targaryen. He is the crowned prince. I guess from our perspective, one of the more honorable, noble Targaryens. He's clearly not mad, and he does a few things in the series. He vouches for Duncan when he appears at the Ashford tournament because he needs someone to vouch for his knighthood. And he also decides to join Duncan in the trial of the seven. So he essentially puts his life on the line for him. That's debatable whether or not he truly put his life on the line, but he does die in the series as a result of taking up arms with Dunk. So, that was a character. I'm not going to hold you. His death definitely hurt my little feelings. I don't know how you felt about him.
Yeah, a lot of people on social media was devastated over Baelor Targaryen. I could tell that a lot of people did not know about his fate because they were just absolutely gutted when that episode when we find out that he dies. But a lot of people were just enamored by him. They were comparing his death and even his story to Ned Stark. And it is true. Like, you can't be noble. You cannot be someone that is a pure, noble, good person in this universe, because eventually you're gonna die. You have to have some kind of unethical, evil intentions in order to survive in this universe, because otherwise you're not going to make it for very long. But I think ultimately, in my opinion, what ended his fate was he shouldn't have fought in his son's armor. I think he was in the wrong. He was in the wrong fit, and that's what probably sealed
it for him.
Had he fought in the right armor that probably could have protected him a little bit better, maybe he could have had a chance.
Yeah, definitely. And he's played by Bertie Carvel, so we really enjoyed his performance, and it was nice to see a dark-haired Targaryen. We don't get that very often, and I think that's
they're always the better ones, aren't they?
Yes, the dark-haired ones, because even
little bit of that
Rhaenys,
Dornish in them. Yeah.
that Dornish blood. But even like Rhaenys, in the books, she has dark hair because of her Baratheon background. But on the series, they
Right.
made her
Yeah, they
silver.
changed it. Yeah,
Yep,
you're right.
yep. And so we meet Prince Maekar Targaryen, who is Baelar's younger brother. He's also Egg's father. He's Aerion's father. He's Darien's father, and he's also Aemon's father. Aemon is from the Game of Thrones series. He played the master at he played the master at Castle Black. And Maekar is played by Sam Sproul. Then we have Prince Aerion Targaryen, the big bad of the series, at least in this season. And he is violent, unstable. He's a childhood abuser of Egg himself. Egg described Aerion going into his bedroom at night when he was a small child with a knife in between his legs and was like, I should make you my sister so I can marry you.
Right.
um, yeah, he's just an over the top character. We encounter him when he essentially breaks Tancel's finger because she killed a dragon in her puppeteer play, and he took offense to that. So that leads Duncan to protect this woman's honor. And actually, what I loved about the scene was Aaron was kind of impressed. He was like, "Why would you do that? Why would you give up a life for this lowly woman? Like, okay, I'm impressed, but now you have to die." So he's an enigmatic character. The actor that plays him, he described like basically trying to find a way to portray him that to kind of show his madness, but not in the same way as previously portrayed. So he was almost like it's always under the surface, like a restless spirit. And he's played by Henry Ashton, who he actually no, that's Darren.
No, Finn Bennett.
Finn Bennett plays him. And Finn actually has played a similar character on another show. It was called Dominus. And it was a show about Claudius's or Augustus, one of the Roman emperor's wives, and he played like her nephew, and he was like a little shit. So it wasn't a bit of a change for him to play this character. And then let's get through. So Prince Darren, I just mentioned him. He's called Darren the Dreamer or Darren the Drunk. He actually does have the site, the I guess it's called a Targaryen Dreamer. He tells Duncan that he saw him before and like stay away from me because their fates are tied. He's a bit more reflective, a bit more empathetic, but he's kind of like useless. He's not very like well regarded. I mean, and Arion is also as well. So like Egg is often described as like the last son, the last good son. And then we have Lionel Targaryen, and actually I'm gonna pause there because I want to see how you feel about Lionel because he was an instant fan favorite for me.
Oh, I loved him as soon as we saw him in the first scene. Like he's just full of jest, full of humor. His sexuality is a little fluid. And I love that because you can tell he's very flirtatious with Dunk, and Dunk is absolutely clueless. And that is actually book accurate because there are times in the book where men flirt with Dunk and he's just absolutely clueless to the fact that he's being flirted with. But yeah, Lionel, I forgot the name of the actor, that Daniel Ings.
Yep,
Daniel
Ings
plays him, and he is just so good at this character, which makes me wonder, like, out of all of the Baratheons, he's the only one that I actually think is like a decent one, because all of the rest of them are pretty insufferable.
Yeah.
Like, Stannis is terrible. I didn't really care for Renly. Like, all of the rest of the Baratheons are like just horrible people. So how did Lionel get involved in this line of
well, they call him the laughing storm. Like he's a good time.
Yeah, he's just here to have a good time. So yeah, I absolutely love him. And even in that last episode where he got a little upset
Testy.
at Dunk. Yeah, I'll love you like a brother, and if you don't come with me, then I'll hate you like
hate you.
So that was a great line.
Yeah, and I love how he's like, and everyone's leaving after the roast, which was Prince Baelard's funeral. The funeral pyre. I'm like, not you calling it a roast. So you know, that guy, he's a lot. I really enjoy his character. And he's a good time. And I knew he was going to be like something else when I saw it was Daniel, because he also played a similar like off the wall character on The Gentleman. So I was just like, okay, okay, I can see this. So yeah. So the next we meet, well, we actually don't meet him until the finale. We meet Valar Targaryen. He is the son of Baelor Targaryen. He's played by Oscar Mormon. What I loved about him is kind of you see the duality of the Targaryen blood and the Martell blood. So he has dark hair, but he has silver streaks, and he has heterochromia, where one eye is a different color. And I think the actor that portrays him has that mutation, but also they gave a contact to the to Birdie so that he would have the same condition as his son on the show. So I thought that was pretty cool. I did spot this. It was never confirmed on the show, but at the funeral scene where you see Valar standing in front of his dad's funeral pyre, behind him is a black woman with like silvery,
I saw her.
purplish hair. I knew from the books her name, not confirmed, but from what I can speculate, her name is Kiara of Tyrosh, and she is the wife of Valar in the novellas. So just based off her placement in that scene, I think that is Kiara, and hopefully we'll see her in future seasons. And then a few more
She black
characters.
in the books.
Yeah, and she's black in the books, or at least darker skinned. If you Google her character, she has dark skin and purple hair, and that's kind of what we saw on the show. So I was like, oh, that might be Kiara. Now I don't know if that's going to be the actress forever, because sometimes we've seen where they have like a side character introduced, and you see a glimpse of them, and then it's a whole different person, actor. But I was like, oh, black canon characters or dark skin characters, yes, more of that. And then we briefly see Lady Gwyn Ashford. She's played by Kara Hogan. She is the daughter of Lord Ashford. So the whole reason why this tournament is being held is to celebrate her name day. And I love that she says to Dunk, like, I'm not upset that you messed up my name day. Like, they deserved it, right? Speaking as far as the trial of the seven. So she's one of the few people on the show that actually tells Dunk, this is not your fault. You're not responsible for the death of Baelor. And then lastly we see Sir Manfred Dondarrion and Red, right? So Sir Manfred was supposed to vouch for Dunk and his service, and he doesn't even remember Sir Arlen. So he's just kind of like a rich guy that just like sleeps with whoever. He's kind of like reminds me of Tyrion. And then we briefly see Plumber, who's the master of games. That was the guy that just had like he needed some Zyrtec in his life, because he kept on like spitting up phlegm. It was disgusting. But he's the tournament registrar. He's the one that told Dunk, okay, if you want to enter this tourney, even though you claim you're a knight, you need someone to vouch for you. So ultimately, it was Baelor Targaryen that did that. But yeah, so those are the main players that we encounter throughout the show. Any thoughts or highlights on any of these characters before we head into the next section?
Um, I wanted to just go back to Arian. I
Okay.
just like the fact that Finn Bennett is doing a really good job in playing this role. One of the things that I notice about his characters, you can tell that Arian is very intimidated by Dunk. There's
Hmm.
various scenes where he's looking at Dunk, and even in the scene at the tourney where he looks like he doesn't want to carry on the battle.
Oh yeah.
And he has that moment where he has this deep sigh of like reluctance. And then the scene where they're about to decide whether or not they're going to do the trial of the seven, and he kind of hesitates. Like, there's just those moments where that Arian really doesn't want to battle Dunk, because I think he's scared of Dunk. Like, he doesn't
Big
want to
guy.
present. Yeah, he doesn't, of course, as the prince, he doesn't want to present that, but you can tell in his eyes, you can tell in his facial expressions, and even when he gives this exasperated sigh, that he does not really want to fight and go to bat with this guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciated Finn's performance of this character throughout, and seeing this interesting duality of this character.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Yeah, I noticed that too in the battle, or I'm sorry, the trial of the seven, after he thinks that he's won and like he thinks Dunk is dead and he gets up
Yeah.
and he's just like, all
Yeah.
right, here we go.
Here we go. Yeah.
Like, you can't kill this guy. Dang. So yeah, I wasn't mad. And I did like how they described it. The show Ira had described, like, he wanted to see what it looked like when a smaller, well-trained Targaryen tourney knight fights up against an inexperienced but very tall, very strong, very gritty, hedge knight. And you want to kind of see that happen because, in the battle, you see like Arion is kind of giving Dunk the business, like he's out pacing him. He's more skilled, but ultimately, a bigger, grittier fighter, once Dunk was like, "F this, I'm not a knight, I'm fighting for my life," and was getting him with that shield, ultimately strength oftentimes wins over being quick. So I definitely like their dynamic.
Also, I want to just add to people on social media needs to give Dunk a break because they were talking about how terrible he is as a fighter, and I'm like, you guys, this is
He's
his
never
first
been to war.
fight. Yeah, he's never been in a battle before. So I think, given his circumstances, I think he did a pretty good job. So
Yeah.
give him a break. It's his first day on the job. I think he did pretty well with what he had to work with.
I agree. Yeah, I was like, give him some grace. Like, come on.
Yeah. Sheesh.
Yeah. Sheesh. So yeah, so we'll go through, high level each episode. So the first episode is the Hedge Knight, right? So we open up with Sir Arlen's death. I love, like, if I could live in that field, that grassy rolling hills with that tree, I would do it. I just feel you could sleep there and just have the most beautiful, restful experience. But that is Sir Arlen's resting place. We see Dunk burying him, in the rain with their three horses nearby, Thunder, Chestnut, and Sweetfoot. It is in the novellas, it is heavily implied that Dunk knights himself. He claims that Sir Arlen had knighted him before his death, but that's never made clear. So after he buries Sir Arlen, he decides to go to the Ashford tourney. Along the way, he stops at an inn and he meets what he believes to be a stable boy. It ends up being Egg. Already from the beginning, Egg's a little smart mouth. He's like, "Hey, can you feed my horses?" He was like, "I could," like, "Are you asking me to do that?" He tends to his horses. He puts on his armor and gets on Thunder, and Dunk is like, "I should box your ears." So there's already like a dynamic there. Dunk encounters Darren at the inn as well, and obviously he's drunk. Darren is Egg's older brother, supposed to be looking after his brother, clearly not paying him no mind. So ultimately, once Dunk decides to go to the Ashford tourney, Egg wants to go with him. Dunk is like, "Nope, you stay here," but ultimately he follows him. So that's how the series began, with the encounter between Dunk and Egg. Any thoughts on that first episode?
First episode was great. I think for me, the first episode tonally, like, I loved it. We talked about the scene where the Game of Thrones music plays and then he starts pooping and stuff.
Yeah.
I just thought the pacing of it was just a little bit slower than what I would have liked.
Yeah.
But going back, and I was arguing with some folks on threads about this because some people were like, "Oh, right out the gate, this is great, this is fast, this is good." But I remember back with Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones started off really slow.
Real slow. Yeah.
So now season wise, this has faster pacing than season 1 of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But the pacing of this episode was just a little bit slow for me, but it still did a good job of establishing all of these characters, and it pays off when you see the rest of the episodes. But yeah, if you're someone that, is a little impatient,
Yeah.
it's kind of a it's kind of a tough episode to get through pacing wise. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I like the way each of the characters were established, and I like the humor of it all as well.
Yeah, yeah. So we see, Dunk, he ends up going to the Ashford tourney, him trying to find someone to vouch for him, trying to seek out Sir Manfred Dondorian, who Sir Arlen served. And he keeps getting turned away. Like, he's like, okay, I keep finding these people that Sir Arlen clearly served with, and no one remembers him. Like, what gives? Like, outside of the insult to this man that he deeply respects, he can't get into the tournament. Like, this is like his livelihood. This is how he makes his money. So ultimately, well, later on in the series, he does end up getting that vouching from Baelor. But we find that Egg shows up to the camp. He takes care of the horses. He does the laundry. He sets up the campfire. He has food out. He caught fish, and so that was Egg's way of showing, like, I can be a good squire. I can serve you. And so Sir Duncan's like, okay, you know what, kid, you're all right with me. You can stay with me for the remainder of the tournament. If you do well, we'll see from there. So that's basically how the episode ends, and I just liked how they were sleeping underneath the tree. That's all you need, while other people are sleeping under like silky, tents. We have the beauty of the sky and the stars, and so they see a shooting star, which is a good omen, and that's how the episode ends. So I enjoyed it. It was a bit slow paced for me, but it was also kind of like nice and heartwarming. So I was like, oh, I can get down with this show. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. The next episode is called Hard Salt Beef. So Dunk ends up, eulogizing Sir Arlen to all the folks around. Once again, they don't know like who's this guy. He ends up meeting Prince Baelor, who ultimately ends up vouching for him. And he ends up also needing his own coat of arms. So that's when he encounters Tansel, who agrees to paint his shield. And it's going to be, I believe it was like a tree in a field with a shooting star. And this shield was found in the home of Brienne of Tarth, which many fans believe is canon for Sir Duncan being an ancestor of Brienne of Tarth. And actually, there was a callback to that in the finale when Sir Lionel asked Dunk to travel with him. He says, "Have you ever been to Tarth?" And I was like, "Ooh, Easter egg!" So, there's definitely some connectivity between the characters throughout this universe. So that I think that episode, I wouldn't call it filler, but there wasn't too much going on. Do you have any comments on salted beef?
Um, I like how this episode mirrors back to episode one because we see Dunk and Egg sitting by the campfire and having a conversation at the beginning or sort of at the end of episode one. And then at the end of
Hmm.
episode two, we see that. So it was a nice end table to those moments. So I like that thread that continues from episode one to episode two, just sort of expounding on their relationship. Um, so yeah, and then seeing Tenzel being introduced was really cool. But yeah, not much to say. I agree with you. It was a little bit of a filler episode. There wasn't a whole lot going on in this one.
Yeah.
Other than Egg being revealed as Prince. That was a big one, but yeah.
Yeah. And so the next episode is the Squire. So I like this episode because when Dunk is asleep, I goes to train the horses. He goes to train Thunder, and he's like, "Go!" Because he wants Dunk to win. He wants Dunk to be successful in this tourney. And he's confronted by Sir Robin Risling. He's one-eyed. I think Sir Robin ends up being one of Dunk's champions, and the trial of the seven. But Egg's obviously hiding his identity from folks there, and he actually sees his family show up to the tourney. So we see Baelor, we see or not Baelor, excuse me, we see Arion show up and Makar show up, and Egg's hiding himself, outside of his head being shaved. He's putting his hood on, and he's trying to just stay away from his family so that he doesn't get spotted. Along the way, they're like, Dunk and Egg are walking through the torment grounds, and they encounter a fortune teller that tells Egg that he will become king one day, but he's going to die in flames. So that's a reference to the Summer Hall tragedy for those who read the books, and that she also mentions that Dunk will encounter a large dragon. The dragon will fall upon him and die, but Dunk will survive. So that could be a reference to Baelor's death. It could be a reference to Egg's death, even though Duncan does not survive that. It could be a reference to that segment of the Targaryen family falling. So that episode, I felt like I think that was episode where they were sharing the goose egg sandwich, like sitting by the tree with sausage, and that was the first time I've seen a breakfast sandwich in a medieval type show. So I was like, that looks good. I need to get down with that. And it also was we actually saw the tourney. We saw Arion behaving dishonorably, killing his opponent's horse. We see Egg saying, kill him. Like he wants his brother to go down. And then we hear the story about how Arion used to treat Egg. So a lot going on there. This also is the episode where Tancel's finger gets broken following the puppeteer performance, and what causes Dunk to step up and put hands on Arion, and as a result of that, he's sentenced to death. And then Egg ends up stepping in and saying like, nope, you cannot put your hands on him. I'm a Targaryen prince. He's with me. And so, Dunk's fate is left, up to interpretation until the next episode. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. So I made a mistake. I said episode 2 was where he's revealed. It's episode 3. So
Yep.
this was the big episode. So remember I said that the pacing was a little bit slow. So for me, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms doesn't really start cooking until episode 3, because a lot is what happens here.
Yeah.
I think we really get into the psyche of Dunk, where he has that conversation with the plumber, where the plumber wants him to, get involved with the tourney, and he doesn't really feel like he's that good enough of, he doesn't have enough confidence in his knighthood, so to speak. So we're still learning more about where he is. And then, we see this huge altercation that happens with Tancel and Arion breaks her finger, and then Dunk comes in to save her. And then we see this big revelation with Egg, where he reveals himself to be a prince, and that he's actually the brother of Arion. So it's a really huge episode. It's a huge climax ending to that episode. And again, we just learn more about these characters and their stories that's further developed in episode 3 than we have in those previous episodes. And this is where it starts cooking, and it just gets even better from there. So hopefully you've stuck around at this point.
Right.
and the show hasn't, because me, in my opinion, I just felt like episodes 1 and 2 were just a little bit on the slow side. It was good, but not enough to where I'm just like, man, this is the best. But then episode 3 was like, okay, now I'm hooked. I got to see where it goes on from here.
Yeah, for sure. And so the next episode is entitled The Seven. So this is when, Duncan is imprisoned. This is his first time encountering Egg in his royal regalia. He's not looking like a little squire, a little stable boy. He's betrayed. Like he's not happy with the fact that Egg lied to him, even though I'm sure he may understand the reasoning behind it. Like, you didn't have to lie to me. You didn't have to lie to kick it. You could have told me the truth. And so, and what I liked about what Sam said about this specific scene is he was like, even though Egg is a kid, and royalty at that, he wasn't going to let him off easy. Like, those tears that Egg had shed weren't moving Dunk. Like, he's just like, you were wrong. You deceived me. You're a prince of the realm, and I'm over here, threatening to box you on the ears. Like, do you realize the position that you put me in? But ultimately, they do end up making amends. And And so Duncan is brought before Baelor, Maker, and Aerion, and learns his fate. So instead of a trial by combat, that Aerion has decided to invoke the Trial of the Seven, which is an ancient rite which allows each individual on opposing sides to have six other champions with them to fight. Makar is pissed. He's just like, "What do you mean you want to do a trial of the seven?" Like, I think it's one, it's showing cowardice, right? So Ariane's hiding behind other people. Two, you're sacrificing people's lives for your own, hubris or for your own sake. And yeah, he's not happy about it. He calls his son an idiot. But so Baelor tells him, like, okay, good luck. This is, at the end of the day, this is Ariane's right as prince. So we're gonna do it in the morning. Dunk, good luck. Find you some champions. So Duncan, who's brand new to this world, this is his first tournament. He doesn't really know anybody. He has to find six other people that are going to be willing to give up their lives for him. Good luck. So he ends up people do end up fighting for him. He ends up picking up his shield from Steely Pate, because at this point, following the attack, Tansel has fled. She's left, but she did at least do what she promised, which is paint his shield. And Steely Pate, like his character, he doesn't pop up very often, but he's played by Yusuf Kakor. So ultimately, Stefan Fossaway decides to fight for Dunk, and he's like, "You're not going to die on my watch, on my honor." And you're just like, "Okay, great." Raymond steps in. He's knighted by Sir Lionel. Sir Lionel joins him. The one-eyed knight that I mentioned earlier, I forgot his name, joins him, and I think two others. And then, they're short. They're short one person. And then Sir Stefan's like, "Well, yeah, I know. I said I would fight for you, but they offered me a lordship. So I'm going to go join the opposing team. You need to find two people." And it's like, what? So that's when Raymond was knighted. And then in comes in the Targaryens, and Prince Baelor says, "I will fight for Dunk." So you're just like, what? Not Prince Baelor. And that's how the episode ends. So I'll turn to you for episode 7, for episode entitled 7.
Yeah, this show starts to really cook after episode 3. So the consistency just builds and builds and builds. This was a great episode. We get to see more of Prince Aeryn's cowardice at play, as you mentioned. That's a great word to describe him, because rather than do a single duel, which is really what could have squashed this whole thing,
Right.
he had to bring everybody else into this drama by making it a trial of the 7. And I think at the end of the day, Prince Aeryn knows that Duncan is superior over him. He knows that he cannot fight Dunk on his own. So that's why he made this into a trial of the 7. And then we get to see Darien's like his powers at play, his abilities to recall dreams that ultimately come true. During that scene where he talks about Dunk
The dragon.
and the dragon, and that he saw a dragon that was beneath him and all of that. So that was a very interesting part of the episode, that it's scary to see him have those premonitions, because it's sad too, because that's why he's drunk.
A drinker.
He drinks to get rid of the pain of being able to see all of these dreams that come true. So it's sort of this tragedy to his existence. And then, that great moment at the end with Baelor, where he comes out and he joins the fight. So I really loved it. It's such a great episode, and the consistency and the pacing was on point.
Yeah, for sure. So the next episode is titled "In the Name of the Mother." So that's alluding, or it's a callback to when a knight is knighted. So when Lionel knighted Raymond, he said, "In the name of the mother, I I knight, I dub you to protect the weak, or in the name of the warrior, So I don't know the whole spiel, but that was why the episode was entitled In the Name of the Mother. So we end up opening up with the trial of the seven. Duncan and Raymond start throwing up as Baylord's giving out directions like, stay vigilant,
More
stay
bodily
up,
functions.
more bodily functions, don't die, which was rich coming from him because he's one of the people that ended up dying. And I love the scene because this is when, like, they're like, they declare the tournament is, I mean, the trial is happening. They blow the horns and they all start rushing out with their horses. And Dunk is frozen. This is his first battle. He's never fought before. And he's like just sitting there and he's sitting on thunder. And I love how Egg on the sidelines is just like, go, and thunder takes off like as he's been trained to do, and then you just see like the jousting, and then it's just a melee. Like it kind of was reminded me of the Battle of the Bastards, like the grittiness. It's muddy, it's foggy, it's dark, and all types of things are happening in all corners. I don't even know who's fighting who until I see their faces. So even before, and as soon as it begins, Dunk gets knocked out. Somebody hits him, he falls to the ground, passes out, and then we're treated to a flashback. So we actually see Dunk's upbringing in Flea Bottom, and we open up with him, basically pillaging and taking from bodies that are falling as a result of a battle. And one of the soldiers or knights like wakes up while like Dunk is trying to take, whatever jewelry or whatever from him, and he starts to like suffocate the guy, and then Rafe shows up and she's like, "What are you doing? This is a knight. We could ransom him, we could." But ultimately dude does end up dying, and she's like, "Damn it." Because they're not able to get him from underneath of the horse that fell on him. And Rafe is played by Chloe Leah. Now, Rafe in the novellas was a boy, but they gender swapped for the series. And if you remember, I don't know if anyone's watched the Dune prequel series on HBO, but Chloe actually was one of the Bene Gesserit or trainees on the show. So I was like, oh, nice to see another familiar face from HBO. So Rafe and Dunk are each other's family, right? They're orphans living on the streets and trying to make ends meet. They're trying to get out of this what they call shithole. They're trying to find a better life. And Dunk says, what if we go to the free cities and it's just as bad as it is here? And Rafe is like, well, we'll go somewhere else. He's like, well, what if that's bad too? So it's like, you think about it existentially, you're just like, like, what if this is all that life has to offer them? And, Duncan doesn't know if he wants to leave because he's like, what if my mom comes back? And she's like, your mom's not coming back. Your mom's dead. Like, if you want a family, you go out there and you get a family. So, before I kind of get into more of the story arc, any thoughts on Rafe as a character?
Oh, I mean, I loved her. She has this very Zendaya look to her. Chloe really liked, and again, going back to what we said before, she and Tenzel look very similar. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, you're right. Rafe was originally a boy in the book. I think also like there's a moment where they're like walking around carrying the head of somebody
Oh yeah.
up the streets of Flea Bottom. So I don't know how that would translate well with the TV adaptation of Rafe and Dunk walking around with the head throughout Flea Bottom. But yeah, this there's an interesting thing that I saw on Threads that someone was commenting about this scene where we go into the flashback of Rafe and Dunk as kids and how it, I guess, quote unquote, interrupts the battle scene of the Trial of the Seven. And they were like, well, why didn't they show more of the battle? And why did they show this scene with them going back as kids? And I'm like, this is an important moment to be able to see because this helps inform why Dunk is the person that he is today. And if you pay attention, which I'm sure you're going to go into more, we understand why he is able to continue to go on to this battle after he falls down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is very significant and important information that we're getting from these flashbacks, and it's needed to insert it in the middle of this trial. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. I feel like media literacy is dying.
It's definitely dead. Every time I get on threads, I'm like, you guys should not have access to phones. Like,
Yeah,
read a book.
yeah, like you guys, we have to have this information in order to understand these characters. I get that you want to see battles and you want to see fighting, and we'll get more of that. But also, this is not that type of show. This is not the Battle of the Bastards. Like, this is not that kind of series. This is Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Angelica. I believe the Trial of the Seven isn't really even that extended in the book. Like,
yeah, in the book, it's basically plays out the same way. We don't get a ton of details. It's like, this happened here, end of story. So, it to your point earlier, Ira adapting the book very closely, right? This is reflective of that. So, folks complaining, like you said, media literacy is dead and they just don't know anything about character development, which is your favorite word. And
I tried not to use it.
I was waiting for you to say character development. You did so good. You did not say it at all. And I was like, character development. But you have to say it once a episode, once a podcast, so it's fine. Yeah, so we get that flashback. So unfortunately, Rafe's fate is a tragic one. They end up scraping enough money to get themselves on board a ship to leave for the free cities, but the price has doubled. Today's price is not yesterday's price. And when they initially came back to the city from their salvaging, they're met by a golden cloak. And I don't know his name, and honestly, I don't even want to give him credit because I didn't like his character very much. But he confronts Rafe, he confronts Dunk. He takes from them, and so Rafe ends up stealing his knife. So she has sticky fingers, and so once they go to try to go sailing to the free cities and they're denied because the price has doubled, they leave, and once again they encounter this gold cloak who takes their money. And then actually Rafe didn't take his knife in that scene. She took his wineskin. So he's like, where's my wineskin? She's like, oh, I sold it. So Rafe, the girl lives on the edge. Instead of just taking her losses, she takes his knife. And so when he realizes that, he confronts her and then he cuts her throat right in front of Duncan. And I was just like, oh, well, that's definitely a Game of Thrones type ending for someone. And it almost in my mind, it was like, Rafe, why would you do that? Like, why did you have to take his knife? Like, what was the reason? So Duncan obviously is infuriated. He starts to fight them. And then Sir Arlen steps in. He's like, in the name of the mother, unhand that boy. And you can see he's drunk, but he takes out these two glow cloaks that were attacking Duncan, ultimately killed Rafe. And, he kills them and he goes about his business. And Duncan is intrigued by this man. And so as he leaves the city, he follows Sir Arlen, and he kind of ends up being a ghost. He follows him all throughout the land, following quietly behind him, suffering in the cold, going hungry, and ultimately he passes out. Approaching Sir Arlen, Sir Arlen goes down to check on him, and he says, get up, right? So that's the very thing that brings Duncan back to reality. So he gets up and, fights for his life at this point. So he's fighting Arion. Arion's getting the best of him. He goes down again. But in addition to the Sir Arlen get up, Eggs, Sir Duncan, get up. And so he gets up. And I noticed a lot of people said that they took that clip of Sir Arlen and Egg saying get up, and that's their alarm clock now. So I thought I was like, you know what? That's a good one. So ultimately, Duncan gets the better of Arion instead of taking his life, which he has every right to do. And Maekar sees that from across the way, and he's just like, my son, my son. He starts fighting everyone around him to get through. He ends up hitting Baelor in the back of the head with the mace. And I didn't even know that was Baelor in the scene, but in hindsight, we knew that was Baelor. Sir Duncan gets Arion, picks him up, and he was like, say it, say it. He's like, I yield and I renounce, my claim, or I guess the accusation, right? I rescind it. And so the battle is over. Duncan has won. He's, in like the armory or the stables, resting up and like ascertaining his injuries. And then Baelor walks in and, Dunk thanks him. He's like, thank you so much. I am your man. I'm here to serve you. And Baelor says, the realm needs good men. And so, you're thinking everything's okay. And he's like, hey, Sir Raymond, please take off my helm. The helm gets taken off. Steely Pate is like, oh, Raymond's like, oh. Egg is in shock. There's a big old hole in the back of his head. In the book, they said when they removed the helm, a big chunky piece of something of a brain came off. They weren't as graphic on the show, but clearly the helm was holding his skull together. Once the helm was removed, he ended up succumbing to his wounds. He falls just like Daron's vision. The dragon falls. Dunk holds him and he's just in tears. He's grieving the loss of this great man. So that's how the episode ends. So I'll pause there for your thoughts, Jamie.
I mean, it was just people were gutted, like I mentioned before on social media. They were like in their feelings, as they should be, because Baelor was so beloved by so many of us. I mean, he is such a noble guy. Also, Bertie Carvel, kind of easy on the eyes.
Yeah, Bertie's nice to look at.
Yeah, people was calling Baelor Bay, Bay hyphen lore.
Right.
Because he was a good looking dude, and we don't often see those kind of noble acts in these kind of stories. So for him to, I would say he did put his life on the line for Duncan to do that, and for him to succumb to his injuries like that, he could have been the king, and we could have had a good king.
Right.
The king who never was. It's sad. So yeah, it was a great episode. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, truly. And to your point earlier, and many have speculated the reason why he died was because he was wearing Valar's armor, his son's armor. So it was a little bit too small for him. So had he had proper fitting helmet when that mace got swung by Makart, it would have absorbed the hit. But because it was too small, it compacted. So what killed him was the helm going into the back of his head and essentially destroying his skull. So very sad end for a noble man. And yeah, I was heartbroken for a couple of days. I was just like, Baelor. But we move on. We gotta go to the next episode, which is the morrow. So this episode opens up with a maester and Sir Lionel standing over a very injured Dunk. And I actually love this scene because like the maester is like, doing all his things, and he's like, this man is dying. He's grievously ill. There's nothing I can do for him. And Lionel's like, you can't do anything for itchy butt. Get out of here, witch. I just love it. And so, he tells Dunk like, look, let's get out of here. The tourney's ended, follow me, I'll treat you like a brother. And like you said, if you don't go with me, then I'll hate you like a brother. But Dunk's like, look, I am no good. Everywhere I go, people die, people get hurt. It's best that I don't go with you. And Lionel's like, what are you talking about? Like, you did the realm a kindness. A dead dragon is good for everyone. So regardless of whether Baelor was considered a good man or not, Lionel doesn't mess with Targaryens. And Raymond Fossaway feels the same way. They hate Targaryens. So he was like, Baelor didn't do anything. He went up against people sworn to protect him. What exactly was he losing? I gave up. I put my life on the line for you. Raymond put his life on the line for you. Two people died for you outside of the Targaryen. Like, that's what you should be talking about. At the end of the day, he said that the gods do not favor frauds, right? So he's saying, Baelor choosing to fight for Dunk, knowing that the people on the other side were sworn to protect him. There was in addition to his nephew and his brother, he's not losing anything. So for that reason, the gods let him die. And so Dunk goes, well, basically, if he's a fraud, then what am I? Right? Because that's to me is them alluding to the fact that Duncan never knighted himself. Even though he calls himself a knight and he embodies the ideals of a knight, he was never truly knighted. And Lionel goes, well, you're not a fraud, you're a mockery. And kind of goes about his business. So and then so he says, we're about to go. We'll leave after the roast, which is the funeral pyre for Baelor. So I'll stop there before we jump to that next sequence.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way this scene opens up. Dunk is obviously still drowning in guilt, and he feels bad about what happened, and I feel really sad for Dunk in this moment because he's just going through it. Like,
Yeah.
first of all, he looks awful, and he looks like he's half
Dead.
alive at this point. Yeah, half dead, half alive. And then also the maester just, he was kind of worthless. I'm just
Blowing
like,
smoke on him and like, where's the milk of the poppy? Like, what
yeah,
are you doing?
and it just seems like he was ready to give up on him. He's like, there's no hope for this guy. I'm like, dude, you're not gonna try anything else. But yeah, this was I like just the way this opens up and yeah, I did not pick up on the Tarth line, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, you want to ever been to Tarth? And I was like,
Yeah, you ever been to Tarth? I did not pick up on that. So yeah, that was really cool.
yeah, it was a cool line. And it just shows the dissension within the noble houses, right? Like not everybody's a fan of the Targaryens, and it kind of leads to further conflicts between them. And it's no surprise that, for example, Robert Baratheon had something against the Targaryens. Not everyone is happy with the way they've ruled. And the irony is that Baelor would have been the opposite of all the things that they hate, but he was taken. So right after, the scene where they're trying to attend to Dunk's wounds, we go to the funeral for Baelor, and we see Valar Targaryen on screen for the first time. And he's, just reflecting, sitting on his own. Duncan ends up approaching him and he was like, your father was a great man. And I really love this line. He said, my father died in my armor. Many sons die in their father's armor, but how many fathers die in their son's armor?
Yeah.
And Dunk doesn't have an answer for that. He's like, I don't know, I was taken instead of your father. And Valar doesn't necessarily hold it against Dunk, but he doesn't want to see him. He's like, okay, away with you, Ser Duncan. So yeah, there's enormous survivors guilt on Duncan's part, as with Maekar. Maekar was the one that delivered that blow. And later on in the episode, Duncan meets with Maekar, and Maekar says, like, people are going to whisper that I intentionally killed my brother. I'm going to hear this till the end of my days. And Duncan says, well, you might have, swung the mace, but he died on my behalf. And so Maekar says, okay, well, they will whisper about you as well. And then there's a line that he says that he wants to understand why the gods, allowed a hedge knight to live over a prince. And he said that, Sir Arlen often said, I wonder what will happen in the morrow. So maybe one of those days he'll wake up and this hedge knight that I am, it'll be needed. It'll be helpful to the realm. And Maekar goes, I don't think so. Because there are as many hedge knights as there are hedges, like basically simplifying who Dunk is. You're simple, you're lowly, you can't do or change anything, my brother's sacrifice wasn't some grand sweeping thing of the gods, because Duncan was referencing when he was talking about this, he was leaning up against a tree. So a reference to the old gods. Targaryen doesn't believe in the old gods. So it was interesting seeing those two in many ways, even though they were on opposing sides, kind of bonding over the fact that, or not bonding, but just expressing that they both feel immense guilt about the Baelor's death. And then Maekar even going on to say, the next time there's a famine, the next time a battle is lost, they'll say, well, this would never have happened if Baelor was around, right? So he's always going to carry the shadow of his older brother, no matter what. It is what it is. And honestly, if Baelor hadn't died, then it wouldn't have made way for Aegon to become king one day. So everything happens for a reason in this show, but, sad to see that type of character go. So, during that whole exchange between Makar and Dunk, Egg is secretly listening. Makar actually gives Dunk a proposal. Look, my son, my last son, he needs direction. And he needs to be someone's squire. He refuses to squire for anyone but you. So what I will do is offer you a place at Summer Hall. My son will squire for you. You will train him. And then in turn, my master of arms will train you. Like, I know Sir Arlen did his best with you, but there's a lot you need to learn. So you're going to have, the best of the best. And Dunk's like, yeah, like, I'm sorry, with all due respect, I'm good on princes. Like, I've had enough. So he leaves and, he sees Dunk in the hallway and he's like, so were you spying? And Egg's like, I'm sorry, he says Egg's in the hallway and he's like, are you spying? And Egg goes, no. But, he knows the truth. And so he's like, he pretty much pleads with him, like, please let me be your squire. And Dunk's like, look, Egg, I can't do it. And so Egg goes, well, I guess you're not the knight I thought you were. And, they kind of part ways. So I felt a bit for Egg because like he wants to go on a big adventure. Why are you doing this to him? He's good for you. He even mentioned how, Egg was a good lad, but it was tough to see them potentially being separated. Any thoughts there?
There's a lot of spying on this show because
A lot of intrigue.
Yeah, Dunk was spying earlier. I think it was episode 2 or maybe 3 on the council on an earlier scene. And then Baylor's like, are you listening in on our conversation? But yeah, I like the comments on social media about Egg's fit. People have been going
It's like he had that stuff on.
He really did. And like even Black Threads in particularly talking about like he's dressed up for like he's going to a Black Panther party or something like that. Like it is a pretty dope fit, I gotta say.
Was.
So yeah, I did feel bad for Egg in that moment because he's grown pretty attached to Dunk, and for Dunk to say that, and I know that Dunk wasn't trying to have any sort of ill will towards Egg in that moment. He's just feeling really bad about what transpired, and he's feeling a lot of shame and guilt, and like you said, survivor's remorse. But for Egg to hear that, he's probably taking it as a personal insult to him.
Yeah.
And so felt pretty bad about him in that moment.
Felt bad, but we know how it ultimately ends up.
Yeah.
So I loved how at one point they did a flashback to Sir Arlen's death. So we're back in that rolling green hills with the tree. Sir Arlen's propped up against the tree and he's telling Duncan a story. And he's like, do you remember the story? Who told you the story? And Duncan's like, you did. So there's almost like a little bit of like, you can tell Sir Arlen's aging, his memories and what it used to be, but he talks about how when he was a young boy and men were sent off to war, they would nail a penny to a tree. And if they came back, they would reclaim the penny, right? So it was symbolic. So that's probably where Sir Arlen Pennytree got his name from. And so as he's telling the story, he pauses and Duncan was like, hey, why didn't you ever knight me? Was it because you thought I would leave you? Because I would never do that. And Sir Arlen just stops and he looks like he's dead. And then Dunk's like, Sir Arlen, sir. And then he was like, and that's why I'm named Pennytree. And a true knight never not finishes the story or whatever the line was. And then I hear like a storm rolling in. So that kind of is like a callback to the first episode where he buries him in the rain. So this is shortly before his death. But I love the humor of the show where we think he's dead and then he comes back and he finishes the story. So this show is canonically saying Dunk never knighted himself. I mean, Dunk was never truly knighted. He knighted himself. Yeah. So your thoughts on that scene?
Yeah. I don't know if the show is saying he knighted himself yet. Right now, at this stage, it's saying that he was never knighted. So we'll see where the story takes us in season 2. But yeah, I love the moment with Sir Arlen of Pennytree and where we thought he was dead. and oh, let me finish the story, and then
And then I'll die.
yeah, a true knight always finishes his story and then he dies. So
Yes.
yeah, again, leaning into the comedy of this, like at the end of the day, remember this is a comedy that
Mhm.
we're always gonna have our little bits here and there. So I really like that, and I forgot about which I that's why I didn't mention it in my recap. I
Mhm.
forgot about his story about the penny and the tree
Mhm.
and how that tied into the end of the episode where he nails the penny to the tree as
Yep.
sort of,
And
an
on
homage to him.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I missed that little part. That's probably because I wasn't paying attention to Sir Arlen's story, but
Yeah, yeah, because
very good.
I ended up rewinding it because I was like, what is he talking about? A penny in a tree, and then I was like, oh, he's Sir Penny Tree, so that's why I caught that bit.
And that
But
and I was wondering why the camera was lingering on the penny in the tree, and I'm like, okay, that's obviously significant. That means,
what is the origin of this?
yeah.
Yep. And so, the next scene, which I really, really, really like this scene. So, Egg is in his room, and he gets up and he looks at his reflection, and he starts to notice that his Targaryen silver hair is growing back. So it's almost like he's having an identity crisis. And so he takes the knife. I guess I was like, oh, he's gonna shave himself. Nope. He takes the knife. He enters his brother's Arion's chambers, tears in his eyes, his brother's resting from his injuries. And I'm like, oh, snap. He's about to murk his brother. Like, he's about to kill him. But what he doesn't account for is Maekar sitting in the room by Arion's bedside. And he doesn't say a word. He gets up, he walks behind Egg, he places his hand on his shoulder. And Egg drops a knife and like just collapses into his father's arms. It's almost like him saying, I know your brother's a monster. I get it. You can't kill him. Come here, son. So that is when he's told that Duncan wants an audience. So Duncan comes back, and this is after he has a conversation with Darion earlier, where Darion says, "My brother wasn't always a little monster," and he goes, "Well, Egg is not a monster; he's just a boy." And Darion's like, "No, I'm talking about Arion. He used to be a simple boy. He used to be happy. He used to love to fish. He wasn't always like this." So it's almost like his environment is what shaped him, and so after that conversation, Egg decides to take Maekar up on his offer, but with one condition. I will allow Egg to squire for me, but he needs to do it on the road. He's going to be, staying in inns. He's not going to be with servants and in royal courts. He's going to see the real world. And Maekar is like, this is my last son. He's not going to sleep in ditches. He's not going to eat, hard salted beef. And Dunk goes, well, Darion never slept in ditches, and Arion only ever had bloody tender steaks. So what does that tell you? But ultimately, Maekar is not having it. He leaves. He's just like, goodbye, good day to you. So we ultimately learn that Dunk and Egg do reunite. So at the end of the episode, everyone's packing up. Dunk is packing up Chestnut and Thunder, and then Sweetfoot comes running along. Raymond ended up buying her back because earlier in the season, he sold her in order to enter into the tourney. But that was at the end of the day, that's not his horse, right? That was Sir Arlen's horse. So he says, she was never my horse. And I think she's better off with you. So Raymond's, he's apparently part of the cider business. He's going to open up another cider orchard. And so he takes Sweetfoot with him, I guess, and with his new wife, Miss Red. And, their friendship ultimately, I hope, lasts throughout the series. But as Dunk is preparing to leave, Egg shows up and he's like, my dad said yes. He says I am to serve you. And he's like, you are to serve me, sir. Right. So they're already back in the dynamic. And he goes, Chestnut is yours. Treat her kindly, but I better not see you on Thunder unless I put you on him. And they go riding off. Actually, right before that is when you mentioned he put the penny into the tree to honor Sir Arlen. I think also to honor himself. Like, I'm a hedge knight. I'm a good man of the realm. I can see why Sir Arlen chose this road instead of being a knight in some noble household. He'd rather be a simple life. So they go off together. And I love how as they're riding off, Egg's like, where should we go? And he's like, anywhere in the Seven Kingdoms. And then Egg goes, well, there's nine. And he's like, no, there's not. There's seven kingdoms. He starts to list them. The Iron Islands, Dorne. Well, he's right. There are more kingdoms outside of the seven because Dorne is an independent kingdom. The Iron Islands is outside of it, but it's all the realms. So they're arguing back and forth. And then Egg's like, well, I've never been over the Red Mountains. I hear there's great puppeteers in Dorne. So almost alluding to visiting Tansel. Although in the books, even though Dunk always thought of her, he never met her again. But I love this closing scene where they're riding off on their respective horses. And then we see Sir Arlen's ghost, right, on Sweetfoot. And he rides with them for a moment, but then he goes off in a different direction. And that's how we think the episode ends. And we see the title card, Night of the Seven Kingdoms. And then we see Makar and
Night of the Nine
Darian.
Kingdoms.
It's the end of the Nine Kingdoms, right?
Yeah.
And then we see Makar and Darian and Arian, and they're going off, and Makar is looking around, and he's like, "Hey, where's Egg? Where's Aegon?" And they're like, "I don't know." He's like, "Ah!" So clearly. Busy. So clearly Egg was lying once again. He did not get permission to go on the road, but he went regardless in true egg character. So that is how the episode or this season ends.
Yeah. A great season. I mean, I love it. I love that they kind of did the okey doke on us, how we thought it was going to end one way. And then we get to the scene with Makar looking around for Egg, and we find out that Egg didn't even get permission. He left on his own
Accord.
recognizances or on his own accord or whatever. But yeah, it was a brilliant season and I loved it. I will say this, that people are doing these really, and I can't stand this. Like when people compare shows to other shows and like, this is better than House of the Dragon. This is better than Game. Like, stop doing that because
they're their own shows.
They have their own. It's its own identity. It's its own, timeline. It's its own franchise. I don't think one show is better than the other. I think that they're very different shows. I think this is a very different show than House of the Dragon. This is a comedy. It's very bite-sized episodes. There's no dragons in this. The production value is very different than House of the Dragon. So it's different. So I don't like to compare it, but it is a very, very good show. So, and both shows are good. I'm not going to say one show is inferior to the other.
Oh yeah. 100%.
I do appreciate this show is very book accurate to Hedge Knight, and I guess the next one is going to be the Sword. What is it? The Sword something.
I just call them the Tales of Egg and Dunk. I know there's like different names for the various novellas.
Sword in it is going to be the second season. But I appreciate that these are very book accurate, and House of the Dragon, unfortunately, has kind of wavered off from the book, Fire and Blood. But aside from that criticism, I think they're both excellent shows. So I just wish people would stop comparing. But this was an incredible season. Loved it. Love these actors. Love the storylines. I can't wait to see where they're going to dive into next with the story. That makes me sad that maybe we won't see Tenzel again. I hope not.
I might bring her back. Yeah, I will say, like, the intention of the show, I think they said they're going to continue this format and come out with the show every year, hopefully. But Ira's hope would have been that they're able to like wait for the actors to age up. So maybe wait a couple years between the first set of seasons so that like we see an older Egg, an older Dunk, and then obviously ending. So that kind of brings me to my next point, because there are major franchise characters in Game of Thrones that we could potentially see in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So some of the connections, so Egg goes on to become King Aegon V, who he is the great-grandfather of Daenerys Targaryen and Rhaegar Targaryen, but he's also the great-great-grandfather of Jon Snow. We also may meet Maester Aemon, who is the older brother. So there's four brothers, Aerion, Darion, Aemon, and Egg, right? So they're closest in age is Egg and Aemon. And it's referenced in the show that he was sent to the Citadel, right? So he's going to be training to be a maester, ultimately becomes maester of Castle Black. And so he's the older brother of Egg, as well as the great uncle of Daenerys Targaryen. I guess he would be the great great uncle of Jon Snow. Duncan the Tall is said to be the ancestor of Brienne Tarth. It is also a popular fan theory and alluded that he had a romance with Old Nan, who was the storyteller, the older lady that looked after Brandon Stark. Because Bran had a vision in the books where he saw what appeared to be a younger version of Old Nan kissing a very tall knight in front of a weirwood tree. So that could explain why Hodor is so tall. And Old Nan is the great grandmother of Hodor. We may potentially also see Bloodraven, his name is Brynden Rivers. He was one of the great bastards of King Aegon the the fourth, I believe. He is the great uncle of Egg, but they were closer in age, so they often refer to each other as cousins. Bloodraven served as hand of the king for King Maekar when he does go on to become king. He was also the master of whispers. But unfortunately, he did some things that upset Aegon, so he was ultimately banished to the Wall. He became Lord Commander and then went on to become the Three-Eyed Raven. So I would love to get into Bloodraven because we did see a glimpse of his younger self in House of the Dragon. Tywin Lannister, the patriarch of the Lannister family, was actually Egg's cupbearer. So we might see a younger Tywin running around, and he ends up being really good friends with King Aerys, the Mad King, who is Aegon's grandson, and like I said, Rhaegar's grandfather. Spoiler alert, Egg ends up dying in the Summerhall tragedy. He wanted to make dragon eggs hatch, so I guess he developed or set fire to Summerhall on accident, and there was a big gathering there, so many Targaryens died, but Prince Rhaegar was born amongst the ashes of Summerhall. And so those are some of and then we may potentially see Barristan Selmy. He's supposed to be included in future novellas for a Duncan Egg. He was said to have unhorsed Ser Dunk at a tournament, so hopefully we will see Barristan Selmy in the series. But those are some characters to potentially look out for as the show continues. So yeah, that basically wraps it up for me. Any final thoughts?
Not much of a spoiler alert, because in episode 1, the fortune teller kind of reveals that a little bit.
Yeah, she does.
So if you do a little bit of the connection with the breadcrumbs, you'll probably already know Aegon's fate before it actually happens. So
yep.
Yeah.
And then hopefully next season we're going to see the consequences of Egg running away without his father's permission, their adventures on the road, how this journey has shaped Egg, because even though he was not very well liked by the other nobles, he was loved by the small folk. So we already see how his journey with Duncan kind of sets him apart as a ruler. So I am definitely looking forward to hopefully the show returning in 2027. But yeah, that wraps it up for me, Jamie. I'll turn it over to you.
That wraps up the show. So thanks guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this season. I certainly did. I know Angelica certainly did. And yeah, we'll see you next time on a future episode, hopefully soon. We'll see what happens with dragons, y'all. That's good.
Yes, we'll be back for dragons, y'all.
Until next time, we'll see you.
All right, bye.
Better shake your booties for black girl nerves. Better shake your booties for black girl nerves.